Okay, so welcome people to this month's seminar. This one's about how to replace your CRM and 5 critical steps. Essentially, it's the learnings that we've taken out of delivering lots and lots of these systems. So the things you might not foresee or things you can plan for that you might not have thought about. So we'll be drawing out some of those and hopefully making it a best practice for those that are looking to replace systems, but those have already got systems and want to improve them as well, because the same lessons work. So if I move to the next slide, you're going to be hearing from 3 of us today. I'm introducing, I'm ending it as well, but also we'll be hearing from Alan and from Jeremy in short order. A few bits of guidance. We're recording the session, so we'll be sharing the slides and we'll be sharing the recording about a day after the session. So, and then we'll email everyone that's registered so that you can access that. It'll also be on our website. Throughout, please ask questions, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end where we'll be answering any questions that come in today, but also there's been questions that we've received thus far anyway, so we'll be covering those. The agenda is quite straightforward. So we're covering, what's it all about? What can a modern CRM and digital system do? How do you get from wherever you are to there? How do you measure the benefits? So how have you created a business case in the first place, and how are you measuring that you're delivering what the point of the project was? And then some practical advice on, some misconceptions, things to think about, things to avoid doing as well. So we'll cover those and then we'll have Q&A. So with that, I'll like to pass over to Alan, and we'll be covering this first session, and then will be Jeremy and then me. So Alan.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steve. So as Steve has said, this is really lessons from the front line of things that have we've noticed going wrong on projects, and how to make sure you're not in that group of people who've had a project go wrong. So the first thing to talk about really is, what do we mean by modern CRM for membership associations? Because it's changed a lot over recent years, and the projects, in all honesty, have become more sophisticated, more complicated. So it used to be that when you were talking about a CRM project, the technology architecture for most membership organizations looked something like this, which is that everything was separate. There would be a separate supplier for an awful lot of these things. So you'd have a separate events and exams and education supplier, perhaps a separate CRM supplier, and certainly a separate website supplier going back in the day. And the view was all very transactional. So how do we let members join online? How do we let members book on their events online? And everything was very just getting that process done, and it was very difficult to do it in isolation. Certainly very difficult to get an overview of a member. And really what membership organizations started pushing for after 2015 was going, yes, we've got online self-service, fine, but actually we want something that's going to empower our organization. It's going to empower our staff. So projects more recently, and certainly all the projects that Smart Impact do, are very much like this now, where when you're talking about a CRM project now, you're typically talking about all of the business processes, yes, that your staff do, but actually CRM is the engine that drives all of the web engagement as well, because good websites are made of good data. So when somebody comes to update their details or book on an event or do some training or update their CPD, of course, the CRM will typically have a window onto the website as well. So websites and CRM are intrinsically linked, but also things like your marketing, things like your engagement with individuals, any kind of engagement and digital comms is all driven by the CRM. So most commonly now, those things are tackled as one single project. It's very common now that we find that because websites and CRM are so intrinsically linked together, that actually people are replacing the CRM and a large chunk of the website at the same time, because it's quite dangerous to do them very separately. So many decisions are interdependent between the two. Likewise, when it comes to your marketing, proving your value to members, personalized communications, that's all part of a typical CRM project now. And if your one supplier isn't doing all of it, then they have to be very aware of it. They have to be able to add value on the other bits. So that's the baseline now when we're talking about a CRM project. It has to encompass everything your staff do, every kind of interaction you have with your external suppliers, and things like automation and workflow, marketing, data, and insight. That's a typical project. Okay, so then we get to, all right, well, how do I make sure all of that is going to work? So I know it's a more complicated style of project now. I know that there are external stakeholders and internal stakeholders, and I know everyone's going to be blaming me if it goes wrong. So what are the bits I need to make sure that I do to go right? So what we spotted over the years is there are some key areas that if you get them right, then other things will fall into place. And if you get them wrong, you might as well kind of go back to the beginning, because you're going to find it really hard to recover. So these areas are, first of all, knowing what you want and agreeing it with everyone. So making sure that you understand yourself very, very thoroughly, and have gotten everyone else in your organization to sign off on it. So I'll come back to these things. I just want to summarize it. I don't want to talk ahead of my slides. So knowing yourself, choosing your tech partners. There are particular things you must do when you're choosing your tech partners that will spell success or doom if you do or don't do them. Getting your organization organized. There is a tendency to think that once you've chosen your supplier, that they will do everything, or that they will bring all of the knowledge, and therefore your role is to just, like, they're going to hoover the floor and your role is to pick up your feet, and then they'll hoover underneath your feet and you put your foot down again. And actually there's a whole lot more dependent on you as a client that you need to be aware of. Then, of course, the project itself, once you're pushing a project through, it could be a year, it could be a year and a half, and how to keep your colleagues motivated, how to keep your colleagues positive about it, and stop the blockers and the wreckers and the moaners getting in the way of your project success. And then finally, measuring the benefits, not forgetting the benefits. People can get so exhausted on projects that they're just desperate to get to the finish line, and they forget why they spent all of this money and went to all of this trouble in the first place. So the elements that really matter during those 5 major blocks of success or failure. Let's start with going back to the first one, knowing what you want and agreeing with everyone. So really, basically, there are 3 main elements of defining what you want, and being able to take what you want out to market. So those 3 main elements of understanding yourself and then explaining yourself to potential suppliers go like this. So you understand your organization, you turn that into a business case, which is basically to say to your organization, can we spend a load of money in order to achieve these benefits? And then the third part of it, after you've built your business case, is getting approval, getting the approval to spend this load of money. And the way that tends to work, and the things that matter with that are, on the first part, going back to not treating it as a technology project. So really starting with not just lip service to, not just a kind of a nod or being polite, really understanding what your strategy and objectives are as an organization. So if somebody says, oh, we want to grow our membership, that's not a strategy, that's an aspiration. So the job of a strategy is to put the word how onto that. How are we going to grow our membership? How is this project going to help grow the membership? So turning strategy from a bunch of aspirations into a how, into a plan, that's really part of understanding your organization and where your project fits in. Understanding your audiences and channels. So yes, members, but what about students? What about potential members? What about people like examiners or whatever? Are they included in our scope or are they not? What are your key problems to be solved? And not just focusing on the technology problems. So the key problems to be solved can be that we're wasting a lot of staff time Staff are feeling demotivated and miffed because they know that they're doing poor value tasks all of the time, or that we're losing to our competition because our offering isn't flexible enough and isn't attractive enough online. Once you understand all of those things, and it's not just a case of you between your ears understanding it, getting your colleagues to sign off on it, getting them to agree that those are things worth spending money on, you're then ready to start building your business case. So, and bear in mind, your business case has to be ready for people who don't know any of this, your fund holders, your non-execs. So you have to explain why the problem needs money to be spent on it. You have to explain what are our options. People very often in a business case just presume the project they want to do. And you've got to consider things like, well, can we improve what we've already got? Even if you're just putting a red pen through it, at least you've got to show you've considered it. Can we do things in stages? Can we do a smaller project, etc., etc.? So out of that will come a reason why it's this scope. Yes, it does include the website. Yes, it does include an integration to the finance system, etc., etc. Therefore, it costs this amount of money over this amount of time. And then you've got to explain why this is a better use of your money than anything else you could be doing with that same money. And what the risks are and how you're going to make sure those risks don't scupper your project. So that's the kind of source material for your business case. And then I just want to make a point here that people too often forget, that when you are creating all of this factual information, there's a really common habit that people do of spending ages creating it in beautiful documents and then just emailing it to people and saying, can you approve this £500,000 spend or this £100,000 spend or whatever it is? And it comes back with a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of, well, why don't we just, do something cheaper or whatever it is? And the reality is that 50% of business case success is actually about the buy-in. Is actually about getting people to agree to it. So the key to it is not just the factual information. That's very important. So the way that we found that it's best to work through this process is as you are developing this factual information, circle in the top right there is as you're developing it, keep showing it to people. Keep having buy-in meetings to say, does this make sense to you? Have I forgotten anything? Are these your problems? Do you agree with this as a solution? And the more you do that before you ask for approval, the more likely you are to get approval. People like being consulted. They like you to check things with them, and they're more likely to approve something if they feel that it's got their views contained in it. So never forget that part, or else you'll just be disappointed and be sent back to the beginning line. So here are some elements that go in the business case, but please don't focus only on those. It's about getting your colleagues to agree with them and to buy into the material in there. So then there are some other points about choosing your technology partner. This, I don't need to say, is a really vital stage in terms of getting it right or wrong. If you choose the wrong technology partner, we have all of these, or you forget to tell them stuff, or you're not clear between yourselves as colleagues, then all of these problems happen. And fully 30 or 40% of projects where they've gone wrong, they trace their roots back to a problem during the technology partner selection. So although it looks like something that should be quick and easy and throw a dart at a list and pick the one that the dart lands on, I'm exaggerating a bit, but actually so many of the problems go back to this that it then becomes obvious you have to treat it as a proper project. You have to do things right on this thing. So what we've learned that people have to do on this stage is invest proper time in your technology partner selection. It's not like buying anything else. It's not like going and buying a new server or going and buying a supplier to manage your printers or even your hosting. This is much more complicated because it affects everything you do, all of your engagement, every business colleague and every business process. So making sure that your partner selection has a complete process of explaining all of that to potential suppliers and spending a lot of time agreeing things between you, and then dragging a lot of time out of your colleagues, who you don't want to give people the excuse of saying, well, no one asked me, or I know that's not in there, but and I didn't tell you, but you didn't give me a chance to tell you. You've got to spend proper time at that early stage. And by the way, there's always the option, that bottom point, of consider paying for expert help. There are people who do nothing else for a living than run technology partner selections in the memberships and charity space, and they've developed years of expertise that can really help with that section of the project. So then we get to the selection process itself. Once you've got your documents ready, your requirements, your tender documents, what we found is that it typically takes 2 or 3 days to evaluate and understand a supplier properly. If you think about, you have to understand their response to your document. That can take hours of reading if you're going to do it properly. They will have to have at least 2 or 3 meetings with you. They're going to have queries, they're going to have follow-ups, and then you're going to have to review their contracts, their references, et cetera, et cetera. So each supplier, if you're going to do it properly, is very, very time consuming. So the key to that then is to not exhaust yourself with this huge list. I've seen technology partner selections where they were going to include 20 organizations at the beginning. And then, of course, everyone's exhausted, and you just, pick one because you're too tired to carry on at the end. It should actually all be about getting it down to a list of no more than about 4 or 5, maybe 6 at the outside, that can all do the job before you then carry on and spend a lot of time with those. So you should only be including people, and this is what the last bullet point is about, that have done projects pretty much exactly like yours, and have that really strong track record, in order for you to even look at them, in order for you to spend, a whole kind of half an hour or an hour with them. You need to have this confidence that they've got to this position first. Then the second thing on there is that these days, if your technology partner can't do the entire scope of your project, then you're looking in the wrong place. There's a modern ecosystem of suppliers that can do all of your website, all of your CRM, all of your events, CPD and training, data analytics, marketing. Because in order to compete in the membership marketplace now, you have to be good at all of those things. There are some that you'll like the way they do it better than others, but if they don't do it at all, or don't do it to a level that you have confidence in, don't include them in your process. You should only be looking at people who can do your entire project. And the reason for that is that if they can't do it, you're then either they're finding out on your dime how hard it is, or you're having to get different suppliers in, and then they always fight with each other. So it's a really simple point, but please make sure you consider that. Okay, and then when you are looking at your selection process, another really common mistake that people make is they look at it as something that only the IT team are doing, or only a small number of colleagues are doing. It actually is vital that you look at it as a learning exercise. It should be entertaining and interesting for your colleagues. It might be the first time they've learned about modern solutions in the market, for 20 years. So take the opportunity to get people a bit excited, to get people a bit positive about the project, because there's a lot of hard work coming. And if they can see the benefits, and what their lives could be like in terms of being more empowered and spending more time on the fun part of their jobs, then they're more likely to support you through the project. So use the vendor selection to do that. Make the suppliers sing and dance a bit so that they show you what good looks like. And then use that to drive forward the rest of the project, and focus on the project benefits through the implementation part of the project itself. Okay, then I'll just make a brief point about this, that what too many organizations do is they run the vendor selection process, and then they act like the supplier is going to provide all the knowledge, is going to provide all the solutions. And actually, what should be happening is that you shouldn't be driven by your supplier. They shouldn't be telling you what to do. They should be providing guidance and advice and experience of previous projects and lots of knowledge of how to make their own projects go well. But actually, you've got to set up your own framework, or that your supplier then fits into. And the reason that's so important is this bit on the left is about setting expectations with your own colleagues and your management team of just how much of their time this project is going to consume. Your supplier can't tell them that. They have to be told that because they don't work for your supplier doesn't manage them. So your management team have to be explaining to colleagues, and you have to be telling the management team just how time consuming this is going to be, that people have roles and responsibilities within the project. They're going to have to meet those roles and responsibilities, or they will be held to account. And all of that needs to be defined in parallel with getting your supplier on board. Don't wait until the supplier is on board. And then also in parallel with getting the supplier on board, you have to make sure that you're documenting things like your scope, your roles and responsibilities, again, your metrics for success, your budget. All of those things have to be ready for when your supplier comes in, because they'll be held to account with those things. You can't ask the supplier to define the things they will be held to account for, or else that's a recipe for things going wrong later. But Jeremy's got some more points on that in a moment as well. So with that, I think I'll just hand over to you, Jeremy, to talk about the actual project and how to make sure that goes well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you confirm that it's come through?
Yes, it has.
Excellent. So good morning, everyone. My name's Jeremy Jaley. I'm Business Development Lead at Smart Impact. So in this section, I'm going to talk about the project itself and some of the critical things that project leaders and project managers should consider to ensure that a CRM project is run successfully, and then discuss how you actually demonstrate project success to your key stakeholders, such as your members, your senior executive, or your council. I'm going to do this by being able to effectively measure and demonstrate impact through benefits realization. Probably unsurprisingly, a lot of the factors that contribute to project success have already been outlined by Alan in the sections he's covered, because knowing what you want, selecting a technology partner that has the products and skills to help you, and getting your association organized and prepared for this type of project are absolutely critical. However, driving project success continues at pace during the project itself, so it's also critical to consider how you will approach and lead this before you start, so that you are well prepared. And look, membership CRM is one of the most mission critical business systems that an association uses, because it's the system of record that drives interactions with your most important stakeholders, your members, as well as the tool that you need to engage the wider universe of contacts and organizations in your profession or industry domain. This means that your staff will be very, very dependent on the existing systems that they're already using to manage these activities, which can fall into one of three categories depending on the state of your digital estate. So there could be your existing membership management system, database, or CRM. It could be a shadow system that they have set up to manage contacts because they don't like your existing membership management system, database, or CRM. Or perhaps most likely of all, if you're in that situation, it's spreadsheets and other informal tools that they've turned to because they can't get either of the other two to work for them. So point number one, which I can't stress enough, is that implementing a new system like a membership CRM is fundamentally a change project. Well, it's fundamentally a technology project that engenders a lot of change. It's both change and technology. And change, to be effective, has to be led from within your business and be committed to by your team. So that's the first sort of point about the nature of these projects. In terms of what this change will look like, I want to provide an overview of what this entails and focus on three types of change that you'll need to lead during a major system implementation. So firstly, there will be system change, so the actual project that you undertake, and this will require a concerted effort on behalf of the organisation to invest in the programme, ensure it's appropriately resourced, and deal with and accommodate the disruption that a major technology project inevitably causes to people's day-to-day working lives. Secondly, there will be business process and technical changes, as you embrace new tools and unlock their potential. And this is normally the key change that businesses are focused on when they set out to adopt new systems, because they recognize that a modern cloud-based CRM can have a seismic impact on an organization's efficiency. Now, at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can ensure that you measure the impact and benefit of this kind of technical change. But to fully capitalize on its potential, you need to be prepared to do some quite hard things, like challenging existing processes, asking teams why things are done in a particular way, with your crosshairs very firmly fixed on outcomes rather than inputs, and being prepared to change processes when it makes sense to do that. And believe me, this is often easier said than done, particularly in organisations with the heritage and traditions of many professional bodies. And finally, and really critically, there's people change, because getting your team to use and maximise a new system requires their buy-in and will likely impact on their day-to-day lives in a number of ways. So there'll be changes to how your core business processes are managed and reported on that they'll have to learn. There'll be changes to who people turn to for advice, support and help, which can be unsettling when you have well-established safety nets in places. And very likely, if you deliver on the most commonly perceived benefit of a new CRM system, which is that it will free up your staff to be able to do more productive and creative activities, then there will be changes to some people's roles and jobs. So ultimately, adopting a change management process will be a critical way to lead the project and drive user adoption. And as Alan said, enthusiasm for the project and change internally. And as I said at the beginning, this drive to change must come from within your business, because a provider like Smart Impact can come to the table with tools and experience of supporting other organisations who've delivered similar systems and similar change. But if that willingness to deliver change is not inherent, then the project will never be anything more than just a technology project. And what you'll end up with is exactly the same system in a slightly more modern looking interface. So what mechanisms can organisations put in place to ensure that the changes a technology project will deliver are successful? Bluntly, it would be impossible in the time that I have to put together an exhaustive list of these. So I'm going to focus on 4 areas. I'm going to talk about sponsorship, resourcing the project effectively, ensuring there are effective governance mechanisms in place to run the project, and communication. So area number 1 is project sponsorship. For your project to have the appropriate leadership, it's absolutely vital that you have someone who is a designated project sponsor, and their role is to own the outcomes of the project, champion the anticipated benefits internally, manage executive relationships with your technology provider, keeping them sighted on factors that impact your association and that might impact the project, and be able to make decisions about budgets, resources, staff focus and time to support the people delivering the project in your team and in the provider's team. Now, without a project sponsor, without that critical champion and senior voice, it would be virtually impossible to steer the operational aspects of the project, let alone the change impact that you're expecting. And the obvious question you're probably asking is, who should the sponsor be? And the answer to this depends on the type of organisation that you are, but it must be someone who is senior enough in the organisation to marshal the resources that you need, and who can be accountable and regularly communicate with your most senior organisational stakeholders. So in many small associations, the project sponsor will be the chief executive, because only they wear that hat. But in medium-sized organisations, it tends to be a director of a business function, such as membership or communications, whose team is closely aligned with the project outcomes. But in some large organisations, it's a dedicated director of change or transformation. But regardless of who it is, having that sponsor in place is absolutely vital. Area number 2 is resourcing the project appropriately, and this definitely builds on the factors outlined by Alan in terms of getting your business organised. So I'm going to try and talk about this in some very practical terms. As food for thought, I wanted to share with you an overview of the project roles that we would normally expect an organisation to have during a membership CRM implementation. Now, before people start falling off their chairs, it's really, really important to stress that this represents the roles that you will need for the project to be successful, but not necessarily people, because different organizations have different scales in terms of staff size and aren't able to resource individuals to all of these roles exclusively. Although in some larger organizations, you end up having multiple people running these roles, like multiple BAs or multiple IT experts, development managers. But understanding that these roles will be required and this interface with the provider around these areas will be required is really, really important. And I just want to focus on the role of SME, the subject matter experts, because in most organizations that I've been involved in, this equates to your staff. They're the people who are actually running your day-to-day operations, who have the domain expertise to support the project. Generally, on a membership CRM project, there are 4 distinct phases, and I just want to talk about what the SMEs should be expecting during each of these phases. So phase number 1 is discovery, and discovery is quite a labour-intensive phase of the project, because the objective during discovery is to meet with specialists from your technology partner and discuss how your current business processes work, the future state that you envision for those processes, and the outputs that you require from the new system to support your work. During this phase, you should expect lots of your staff to be involved in workshops, to be reviewing output documents from those workshops, such as requirement spreadsheets, user stories, project plans, and project specification documents. And getting this phase right, i.e. detailing the right system that you need, is really, really fundamental to overall project success. So during phase 1, you need to invest quite a bit of time from your team into supporting this process. The second phase is build, and the good news is that build is generally a longer but less labour intensive period for your staff, so there'll be less time input required on a day-to-day basis. But there will be times when subject matter experts need to be involved in the process to validate deliverables and be involved in project refinement. So again, as a project leader, making sure that people have the scope in their day-to-day jobs to support that is really, really important. Phase 3 is user acceptance testing. So this is where you are effectively testing the system and ensuring that it is ready to be deployed and to go live. And I'm going to go a little bit warts and all here in my description of UAT, because I can't stress enough 2 things about UAT. Number 1, it's the most important phase of the project because it is the business end of the engagement, and it's when the work that you've been doing throughout the project is crystallized, signed off, and made ready for go live. But number 2, unfortunately, testing will probably take longer than you imagine, and it's highly likely that it will be difficult to get people to want to do it for as long as it needs to be effective. And that goes both for the senior staff who are unlocking the resources and the staff themselves who are undertaking the testing. I said it was warts and all. Starting testing might seem exciting for people because the initial perception is that it's about getting to grips with the new system. But in fact, it's much more than just this. It's about being very methodical, persistent, and detailed about how the system works, providing high quality feedback to your technology partner to support refinement and rework, and quite often thinking around corners to envision lots of possible permutations of using the system live. The critical point is that as a project leader, you have to make sure that the team has enough time to participate in testing. Unfortunately, it comes near the end of a project, so you've got plenty of time in advance to think about that, but you need to understand and communicate its value internally, and you need to make sure that people undertaking testing are encouraged and supported throughout to do a thorough job. However, believe me, if you nail the testing phase, then you're setting the entire project up for success. The final phase is go live, and this will be where you roll out the system to your wider team. Again, this is a time when making sure that people feel supported and able to voice concerns and issues, and then see things happening to address those. That's really important as well, is vital. It's a bit of a cliche, but we often say that go live is actually only the start of the new system's life cycle. So project leaders need to make sure that they've put in place the right support mechanisms for their teams, and also to think about measuring the impact the system makes and communicating quick wins and successes back to the business. Area number 3 is putting in place effective governance to track the success of the project, to flag risks and issues early, and to ensure that there are appropriate mechanisms in place to flag any challenges. There are several tools that can be deployed to support this, and the scale of your organisation will definitely dictate precisely how you manage it. But as a minimum, we would recommend a regular project report with input from both you and your provider that details project progress. A RAID log, which documents risks, actions, issues and decisions throughout the project. That's likely to be a tool that you use during and after the project to evaluate how things went. Weekly project management meetings between your core delivery team and the provider's core delivery team, and the way Smart Impact works absolutely supports that, and we'd absolutely encourage you to make sure that that's how you set up that liaison with your provider. Monthly executive level meetings with the project sponsor and your provider's account manager. And to support that, but also to support reporting back to your internal stakeholders, having access to those reports and those resources I've just described, but also being able to get hold of those things quickly can make a huge difference in delivering confidence to senior managers when you are feeding back on how the project is going. And finally, I want to stress the importance of good communication, partly because it acts as a nice bridge between this point and the point I want to make about benefits realisation at the end. But during projects that engender a lot of change, providing regular communication to stakeholders can provide a whole plethora of benefits, including reminding people of the project's goals and objectives. So reminding people of the why to keep them motivated and encouraged, coordinating collaboration and feedback, and giving people the opportunity to share thoughts and suggestions, and building trust and relationships through the project team and the wider business. Now, the specific plan you implement to manage communications will also vary from business to business depending on your resources, but techniques that we have seen working particularly well within our clients are regular internal meetings where you feed back to the wider business on the project's progress, a newsletter or email update covering topics related to the project, or simply asking people after they've interacted with the project team what their thoughts are about the project, and trying to allay any concerns or fears that people may have. Again, being responsive and reactive to that, but also trying to be transparent. And I think, critically, while the project sponsor might not always be the person actually delivering those communications, although in some businesses they might be, it's very important that they take ownership of making sure that that internal communication happens. So finally, I want to talk about benefits realization. And in a sense, we're coming full circle now back to Alan's initial point about knowing why you're undertaking this technology project in the first place. I've worked with associations on many CRM implementations and other technology projects like setting up websites and online communities. And if I was to pot boil why these projects take place at all, it's generally for one of two reasons. Either the organisation is looking to optimise how it works, i.e. it's looking to improve its existing business processes or how it interacts with its existing stakeholders, or it's trying to transform how it operates or how an aspect of it operates. So to launch a new service, new benefits or new offerings that it was not able to do in the past. Bit of a hobby horse of mine, but digital transformation as a phrase has become a much maligned phrase, I think, because we often try to use it incorrectly as a catch-all term for digital projects in general. But if you stick to that notion of it actually being about changing something fundamental about how your business operates, I think it's absolutely valid. However, the reality in my experience is that most professional bodies and trade associations implementing new CRM systems are not really trying to transform, they're trying to optimize. So they're trying to move away from manual paper or spreadsheet-based processes to much more streamlined, automated digital processes. But they're not trying to fundamentally change what they do as organizations, like accrediting professionals, bringing members together on shared issues, engaging and informing the wider public, or representing the interests of their members to policymakers and regulators. Why, might you ask, am I stressing this rather technical difference between digital transformation and digital optimization? Well, the reason is project success is necessarily determined by the extent to which you deliver on either of those objectives. Or of course, you could be trying to deliver a mixture of both, but regardless, fundamentally understanding what you're trying to achieve means needing a baseline that you can tangibly demonstrate how outcomes have impacted that. So if you're trying to launch a new product or service or create a new income stream, then you'll probably need to have a baseline based on this. So i.e., actually delivering a new service, or measuring the income that you get from a new product, or demonstrating that members are engaging with the organization in a new way. But if you're trying to digitally optimize, then you will need a baseline to measure that. And this will probably require looking at your existing processes before the project and determining things like, what is the customer or member experience that we're trying to improve? So that could be using your current Net Promoter Score, or the volume of queries or complaints you receive about a given service, or perhaps looking at metrics like the amount of time that it takes for you to manage key processes, or how much those processes are costing you. And then after the project, applying the same measures to those same activities to determine the impact that the new system is having. So look, like so much of what I've described during this section, a lot of how you actually go about managing this will depend on the size of your organization and the time and energy that you can dedicate to it. But I have seen some very small organizations deliver benefit realization statements much more successfully than large organizations, simply by putting these baselines in place so that they can be objective about feeding back on what they have achieved. And overall, if you can't demonstrate that the project has been impactful, it begs the question of whether you should go through the effort of the change in the first place. So credibly pointing to the expected and delivered outcomes will significantly help you to evaluate and champion the benefits of a new system. So that's a very high level overview of some of the key things you'll need to consider during the project. Steve, I think I'm going to hand over to you now to talk about some common pitfalls and misconceptions.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Jeremy. So I'm going to spend 10 minutes or so just covering some of the stuff we've learned and pointing out, some common thoughts that we hear in customers, and then some case studies as well. So if we look at some common pitfalls, and these are things that we hear at the beginning of selection processes or during projects and so on. But quite commonly, there's been a growth more and more about agile. We must have agile. We want pure agile, or whether it's part agile or whatever. Agile's good, but it's not the answer to making your system a big success by itself. So we've been involved, and I'll cover one of these in our case studies, where projects have just been purely agile, where you look at, say, membership, and you do all the work you need in iterations on membership, and then you move to events and groups and so on. If you don't look across the width of your requirements in functionality to begin with, like in discovery, you can quite often in agile go down a bit of a rabbit hole. So we've had situations where we've been asked to follow the customer's agile method, and you go down and develop a lot of membership stuff only to have to undo some of it because it doesn't work when you move to events. So look across the project and then iterate down on the different areas of membership, events, and so on afterwards. The other thing to say about Agile, it really allows you to innovate and be very, very flexible. So it needs very tight control from you and the customer, or sorry, you and the supplier, otherwise the bills can go up. And some suppliers are just purely Agile. They don't focus so much on the bills, and that's obviously key. But the other side is it takes a lot of your staff's effort. So if you've got a lot of available staff who can react at short notice when they're required to by Agile, great. But almost no membership association has that freedom of staff. They're too busy. So we're not against Agile at all. We think it's very useful, and our projects all are Agile, but at the front, make sure you've got the width of the project. So that's the biggest point I wanted to make, but there's a couple of others here as well. So a lot of associations say, well, we're different from every other association. Yeah, we need a bespoke system, by which they mean we need something built either by a supplier for us or build one ourselves. Now, the reality is those times have gone. There are so many good platform systems out there that can be configured, not bespoked, and they meet almost every need of most organizations. There'll be some tuning needed, but you won't have any new function that's not done before. It's just been done in the mature market. So I would say very strongly, look at suppliers, involve suppliers, don't try to bespoke what you've got either internally or through suppliers, because if you're doing it internally, it'll take you forever. Our own systems have got hundreds of man years of development in them. And also, you'll never be able to iterate and develop your own systems with your own staff as fast as external suppliers are doing, because there's just simply not that volume of scale. So you'll always be behind the curve. So that's what I would say about doing it yourself. To turn that round the other way, a lot of what we're hearing at the moment is, oh, we must have our own IP. Now, it's a big subject, but I think IP is just a label for we want control of our own system and the ability to use the system without being reliant on a supplier. You don't need IP for that. You need the right to use the supplier's IP. So a number of suppliers say, look, if you're not paying this month, we'll turn it off. Avoid that, because you are absolutely reliant on your supplier there. What we do at Smart Impact is we basically, at the beginning of our projects, customers pay a fee to use our software and they get a license to use it forever. So whether we're around or not, you can still continue to use your software. So you've got a reliable and long-term solution. So the IP argument is often a red herring as well, in my view. A sort of link to that is, well, we've got a shop, so we need a commercial supplier who understands selling things, not one of these not-profit experts. We see that fail so often. So many not-for-profit suppliers think, oh, it's simple, it's not for profit. We're commercial, we're used to big businesses. How can it be more complicated than that? As customers that have tried that route found out, it generally means very underestimated projects. They're necessarily back into the bespoke area because they're building something from scratch because they don't have their own membership IP like specialists like us do, and so on. So again, you'll find that some not-profit specialists have good commercial experience of web shops, of selling things, of driving sales and opportunities, because, you know, like us, we've come from that sort of background, but don't think that you can go to commercial suppliers and expect them to have a non-profit background, because that doesn't seem to work. Next, well, we're buying a system from a supplier, so they're going to do all the work. Now, the phrase we try to make absolutely sure customers understand is that these systems have got to be installed with you, not installed at you. So the reality is that really, in terms of the effort of systems, you may be supplying a supplier hundreds of days, but you will be doing something like twice as much work as the supplier with your own staff and testing and training and all of those things. So never underestimate this. It's an old maxim. Loads of customers still underestimate it. We find very sophisticated organizations now still underestimating it or thinking they can implement these things without someone on their side project managing it and without lots of effort of their staff, and it'll just fit in as business as usual. It doesn't. That extends the project. It makes them success. It can make them more expensive if they're extended, and it can certainly make them less successful if the right staff aren't involved. And then the final point is, oh, well, we need different suppliers for all of the different areas because they're specialists. So, web, apps, and so on. And again, those days are pretty gone. There are still specialists in each of these areas, but it's much more complex to get a system off multiple suppliers and get them to work together properly and fix any issues that arise in the project or in support. There are good organizations now that can do all of this. So our advice is, look at those people as much as you can, because they take care of all of the tech and the integration then, and you can focus on improving your business and your business processes. So those are the sort of common misconceptions that we hear a lot of, and I'd say think hard about what applies to you and what is driving you if your organization is thinking down one of these lines. So very quickly, let's talk about some project success. So first, as Alan mentioned, and as Jeremy mentioned, business case is important. So, create a good one, but what you put in it, funnily enough, you're going to have to live up to. So don't put things in that you think are unachievable or targets that are too high. And when you're reporting on the project success, always quote back from the business case. You might have people saying, well, look, it doesn't, the system's great, but it doesn't do this thing. Well, if that thing wasn't in the business case, you can't be held accountable for it. It may be that you managed to actually do some stuff about something which wasn't in the business case, but the business case is usually thorough enough. Refer to it, deliver it, make sure it's deliverable, and then refer back to it when you're measuring that. And the other side is measuring success. So not every supplier sees success as you will, and many suppliers and many customers see going live as success. It's not. It's just the step to success. You've got to go live, but you've got to start realizing benefits. So when you're talking with suppliers, ask them what their measures of success are, and particularly what they think your measures of success should be in terms of the improvements around your business. And these aren't technical benefits, these are business benefits. So then measure them through. So as soon as examples of these, just a quick flash through a few customers. So SOE is the Society of Operations Engineers, and they're a reasonably small engineering organization, but they were desperate for a new system, but very worried about CRM project overrun and all of the stories that you hear a lot about. So they were very keen on getting a supplier that could control projects very, very well. And so, as you can see down their quote on the left, essentially we worked very hard on focusing on their key success areas, which were delivering the requirements they wanted, but also keeping it within time, within budget, and so on. But the point is there now they've got a very good platform that they're able to start developing on and driving various parts of their business forwards. The second is AIMA, which is the Internal Investments Management Association. So it's sort of different finance applications and so on. But they've been the customer for over 10 years now, and their key was getting a platform again that they could innovate new products on, drive their membership hard, and so on. But it's very corporate membership, so they wanted to be able to expand, particularly in the Far East. So we drove the system around that, but also delighting membership. So one of their metrics is they have driven retention up and up and up and kept it consistently over 94%, which for a corporate membership association is pretty impressive. And then the final story is about the Bar Council. So their target was, they were replacing an Integra application here, but they wanted full digital transformation, grow membership, improve services, and save money, all in the same system. So, so we worked hard with them there, and essentially it's helped them not only service their members better and process them better, but because it improved their processes so much, in the first year alone, it saved £148,000. So that's a massive payback very early on their system. And then we were able to then start innovating it. So where it says 511 hours, this was an app that helped barristers get into courts past security much quicker. It reduced their waiting time from 45 minutes to something like 5 to 10 minutes. So that saved hours and hours just in the pilot. So thousands of hours over the years. And these are all good benefits. So again, it's good having baseline metrics, but there are some soft benefits as well. But the project should be very, very focused on them. And the supplier should be very focused on them. And with that, I'll hand back to Alan and we can have Q&A.
You're on mute, Alan.
So just waving my arms around. Thank you. So we have some really great pre-event questions come in. So just time for a couple. So one question was, we have lots of different suppliers at the minute, which makes everything hell. So it's quite explicit. Is it realistic to get down to one main supplier for CRM, events, training, conferences, quite a shopping list, e-commerce, and the website? So, Jeremy, do you mind if I fire that question towards you? Is it realistic to get down to one main supplier for that shopping list of things?
So, Alan, it depends on the provider that you pick, right? But everything that you've just described in that question are things that Smart Impact do. So I think the answer is absolutely, it is possible to find a provider to support all of those areas. Trying to deliver all of those in one go is probably a very, very tall order for an organization in terms of the amount of change and the amount of project activity that you want to run. But absolutely, there are businesses that support that full gamut of services. Smart Impact is a specialist working with membership organizations and professional bodies. So we're very, very familiar with all the core areas that those types of businesses are looking for.
Great, thank you. And of course, whether it's one main supplier, it should be the fewest possible suppliers.
Yeah.
And I agree, that's where the market's been heading in recent years.
And
Steve,
if I can just add to that as well, Alan. So the Bar Council was a good example because they actually wanted a website and a CRM system at the same time. But you know, at the time they had a website supplier they wanted to work with separately as well. But they actually asked us to prime the whole thing. So some suppliers, if you don't supply all of the constituent parts, you can still prime it. So there's one lead supplier, and that worked very, very well for them. So,
well, you've kind of answered the next question, which was, does CRM do CRM project? Does Smart Impact do CRM projects without changing the website? So maybe just a few words on that, Steve, and then I want to get to one more question and then call it. That's enough, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can supply CRM systems by themselves, and we can supply web systems by themselves, or we can integrate them together with whatever tools you've got. So we don't rip out and replace for the hell of it. If things are working well, definitely carry on using them. The one thing I would say is if you've got a quite good website, but you think that just replacing one part of it or the CRM system can give you massive advantages, then talk to us and we'll look at that. But a number of people we've seen try to replace things but with too low a budget, so think about that carefully as well. But the CRM is able to really drive and energize a good website if your website's of the right sort of current technology. So maybe fixing CRM and then bringing your website to life is a good way to go.
Fantastic. And then final question, Jeremy, this was asked more than once. How difficult would it be to get a project cost? And can people just engage with you and you'll be able to work out a project cost with them?
Yeah, I mean, we'd certainly be able to give sort of rough orders of magnitude, Alan, based on conversations, understanding what organizations are trying to achieve. Normally during supplier selections, organizations let us know what their requirements are to a certain level of detail. There's no point going to the sort of infinite level of detail because you won't be able to take into account the impact of the technology. If you do that, you'll just be documenting effectively how you currently operate. But if organizations talk with us about what they are looking to achieve, the key areas of the system that they want us to deliver on, and broadly the types of operations they manage, absolutely it's possible for us to give some indicative costs for these kinds of projects.
Fantastic. So thanks so much. Steve, do you mind if I just hand over back to you then? And then we'll follow up with emails and the content by video and so on.
Great, yeah. So thanks everyone for attending. We hope that was interesting. We'll be sending the recordings out by email over the next few days. By all means, please do go to our website at smartimpact/events. You can see there's a load of other things that we've got planned for from January onwards. And they're usually around this time, sort of Tuesdays, 9:30. And with that, we'll just say thanks very much. So we'll send this stuff through. We hope it's interesting. And if you'd like to talk to any of us about any of the things we raised, then please reach out to us. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.